Call to order the special board meeting for Thursday, September 12th. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
Make a motion to approve the agenda.
Is there a second?
I second.
All in favor, raise your right hand. Motion carried. With that, we'll move over to the presentation from Dustin Avey.
Good to see everyone again this evening, and congratulations on a successful election. It's exciting times, and there's a lot of work put into it and a lot of work yet to do. So a couple things that I think are important, really just revisiting the plan of finance and really discussing the next steps forward. As with typical bond projects, kind of there's paths that go different directions. Obviously, there's an architectural design and a construction path, and there's also obviously the financing path. And as we've talked about through the campaign process, we're actually in a very, very good position in light of where current market interest rates are to deliver something that's better than what we did to the public during the campaign. And so I really wanted to visit with you, just give you more of a plan of finance update, and then review kind of what the next steps in the process is to proceed. So interest rate charts, obviously, just give you some perspective, or really there's a few pages in your packet. You'll see an interest rate chart. Again, this gives you some historical perspective going back to 1987 with where rates have been and where rates are currently. And this chart was actually as of last Friday the 6th, and you can see that since 1987, rates have been higher than their current levels 99% of the time. I would say that really this week we have seen an uptick in interest rates, probably 10 basis points or so higher this week. But nonetheless, we were still very, very near all-time lows, which is a good thing from the standpoint of meeting our objectives. And I think it's important as we talk about plan of finance. The number one objective, and I presume this board is no different, but the number one objective is making sure we can meet the mill levy commitment that we communicated to voters during the campaign. Right? And if we can do that, obviously that becomes a success from a plan of finance perspective. So the following chart, more of a long-term chart. The second chart just kind of gives you some perspective on what's happened in the last year. And as we discussed going back to January and February, right, the concern has always been, hey, what happens if rates are higher? So obviously our projections that we were using in our analysis were somewhat conservative with the uncertainty of what happens with rates from when we start our planning process to the time we have our election to the time we actually can sell bonds. Obviously we're very diligent on making sure that we're being conservative in some of those projections. Fortunately, we're in a position where rates have actually come down and we're able to deliver something better. There's a summary which I think is very, very important. So as we look at the numbers, there are obviously a lot of pages of numbers that kind of show and help illustrate how this transaction gets put together, but I really thought it'd be helpful just to provide a summary to show kind of the two different components and what we're looking at. Obviously, the bonds and the term of the bonds is 25 years, no different than what was communicated to voters. We are using an interest rate projection of 3.95% in all the calculations and projections. We are estimating that based upon current market rates, an interest rate of 3.16% rather than 3.95%, which if you do the calculations and the math, it's about $7 million less of interest expense over 25 years just based on interest rate. Okay, so I'll show you kind of what that looks like from a mill levy perspective, but I think what the bottom line is, it really gives the district a lot of added flexibility and options in future years to be able to manage the mill levy in the bond interest fund, which I think is critical from a long-term planning perspective. The second component of that obviously is a refinancing, and I know we've talked about this some as well, but there is a 2008 bond issue outstanding that has a maturity date of 2031 and it's an amount of $530,000, and the district is currently paying interest only on that bond. Okay, so if it remains in place as is, we'd be paying interest on it only for the next 10 years and then finally pay it off in 2031. We have capacity because of where interest rates are, number one, but we have capacity within our bond budget to accelerate that one bond issue and pay it off in 2021, so the next budget year. So we're accelerating it by 10 years, and obviously as a result of accelerating that and paying that off early, we're saving close to $300,000 of interest on just that one bond.
And that's no impact to the mill levy,
No.
that's just paying it off and getting it out of here.
It is, because, yeah, we have the capacity and the ability within our existing mill levy to pay that off and just be done with it. It doesn't really make sense to pay interest only on that for another 10 years, given where rates are. But that bond has an outstanding rate of 5% too, right? So now we're refinancing it and paying it off in 2021 at a rate of 2%. So about $290,000, which, number one, we save interest costs. Number two, we pay it off earlier. And number three, we have capacity to do within our existing mill levy. And then the other component, again, really just a matter of, again, interest rate environment. And again, this was, as we were talking about the bond and the planning, the financial plan back in January and February and March and through the spring, obviously rates weren't conducive to consider refinancing any other bond issues at that time. And it really just in light of where things have gone since the middle of August, we've also obviously evaluated other potential opportunities in refinancings, and so one of them is also refinancing the district's 2014 bonds, and those are outstanding at a rate of 4%, and then after refinancing it's 2.36%, which generates another little over $500,000 of interest cost savings. I think it's very, very important that this is really an interest savings transaction only, right? So if something were to happen where interest rates were to increase between now and the time we were able to sell bonds, we don't have to refinance this, okay? We're really looking at now based upon where interest rate projections are and what this type of savings is. But if something happens where rates increase, where there's not enough savings to justify proceeding with the refinancing, we'll just move it out. We won't include it in the transaction. We'll proceed without refinancing. But the authorization tonight allows us to start that process to begin evaluating it, and obviously if rates are favorable, we're in a position to save the district some additional dollars.
Or the 2014B bonds, then you'd be saving the interest and it would be paid off at the same.
Correct. No extension of the term of the original financing. It's just truly just interest cost savings on an annual basis, keeping the term the same.
Okay.
Good question.
Can I just ask, I mean, if I understand with the resolution we're considering, this gets us, we do all the paperwork, we go out to market, but then you touch base with myself and Lauren before we actually execute, so that whether there's movement in rates, we're still at a net savings based on cost.
That's exactly right. Yeah, before, no question. And it'll be, I would tell you from a timing perspective, and we'll go through a calendar, but from a timing perspective, again, we're trying to accelerate things to some extent because of where rates are currently. And we're doing the best we can to move this forward in a timely manner. So I'm thinking that right now, at the very earliest, it may be the end of the last week of September, or that first week of October, which is, I think maybe the first is on a Tuesday or the second is a Wednesday. So sometime in that time range, that week, our hope is to be able to position to put the district in the marketplace and secure interest rates. From a plan perspective, right, so I think it's important to think about what the overall plan. Again, this is just revisiting the same thing that we've looked at really since the last winter, right? And just looking at, hey, we've developed a financial plan on a conservative basis with the commitment to the voters in the district that this project would increase the millage by 3 mills. And so as you can see, obviously, we're showing the 3 mill increase here. And you can see that based upon the current financial condition and the current interest rates and the current valuation and the current level of state aid, the district's able to meet that commitment to the voters of the school district. And this document is important because it's not just something that gets done now. Every year during the budget process, this document will be updated with new valuations, new state aid figures each year, so that as you're going through the budget process, you're looking at this saying, number one, are we keeping our commitment, number one? And number two, based upon keeping your commitment, what's this analysis look like? So it's an ongoing analysis that we'll work through every single year during the budget process. From a procedural standpoint, again, that very last page is just an example of what a timeline looks like. And again, this evening's meeting is merely procedural in nature. There's nothing binding about moving forward, but it's just procedural, that allowing us permission to proceed with all the documentation to prepare for the sale of the bonds. And I think what's important, and Jim alluded to, is with the approval of it, there's a section in there that provides parameters. It says we can secure interest rates on any date other than a board meeting date as long as we meet certain guidelines. And that's important because obviously we want to make sure we can, you know, we don't want to call you on the first day, well, we have to have a special meeting tonight to do this. We want to be able to say October 1st works, the market is favorable, we want to lock in interest rates. You as the board allow us to do that and lock in interest rates, and we come back with full approval with what's called a bond resolution on the 14th, which ratifies those rates, and then we proceed with closing thereafter. But the intent would be is we have a bond rating process, right? So no different than us as individuals going to get a mortgage or a loan. When we do that, they run a credit score on us as individuals. The same sort of concept happens in the bond market. The district has done this on past bond issues as well. But we get a credit score assigned to the bond transaction of the school district, and obviously the higher their credit rating for the transaction, the lower the interest rate that can be secured for the financing as well. And so we actually have that bond rating conference call next Monday, and we expect to have the results of what that bond rating is by the following Monday. The lock-in rates, have everything approved by the board on the October 14th meeting, and then funds would be available November 5th. So when funds are available, obviously those are dollars that can be used for construction purposes. Right now, I think our plan is going to be we want to obviously give local banks the opportunity to invest all or a portion of the funds for the construction project. So I think our initial plan will be we're gonna wire the funds to a fiscal agent, and a fiscal agent's used by school districts to basically park the money during the construction project, and also then help with the investment of those funds. If there is a local bank or banks that want all or a portion of it, we can then take the money from the fiscal agent, and let's say we have 4 local banks that all want $10 million each. Okay, we can take $40 million from the fiscal agent, wire $10 million to each bank to help with the investment of those funds during the construction project, and the fiscal agent would help with the investment of the balance of the funds during the construction project. And then as funds are needed, right, so as the district gets invoices from the contractors or the architects, one or two things will have to happen. We'll need to work out some logistic things, but typically what happens is the district will submit what's called a requisition certificate to the fiscal agent, who's really kind of a trustee or the custodian of the funds. The custodian of the funds will wire those funds back down to the school district's account, and the school district will then make the payment to the contractor. So there's a couple moving pieces on the investment side that we'll work through, and obviously we want to make sure that we provide the priority and the ability for local banks, if they're interested, to invest the funds. And I will say don't be disappointed if they are or not involved. It just really depends on the market situation and what their demand is for deposits at the time. So we have some local banks who are very interested, and we have some who are not. It just depends on each individual situation.
How do we address each bank locally with this opportunity?
I think that the best approach would be probably within the next couple weeks is send them a letter, and I'll help you with what that letter looks like. But just sending them a letter saying, we anticipate having bond funds available on a specific date. We are interested in determining what your interest level would be in helping the district invest all or a portion of those funds. By X date, would you please send us, number one, what your interest level is, and if you're interested, by how much you'd be interested in investing, and then give us an estimated rate based upon the following maturity schedule of investments.
Okay. And we kind of have that outlined based on, the construction timeframe, have we got kind of that timeframe of when we think our funds would?
We could, and really, we could really be very strategic about that too, because we may have banks that say, you know what, the best thing we have is a money market, and that money market may be very, very good. So we may say, you know what, let's leave our cash in our existing, let's leave some liquidity in this money market account, and use that as our project fund to pay expenses out of, right? And we may have one bank say, well, I really don't want to invest for more than 1 year. And so now we take that draw schedule that we have from the contractor and say, okay, well, in the next year we anticipate spending $8 million. Let's take that $8 million and invest it with this bank. And so we'll have to just be somewhat creative with that based upon what.
Figure out their interest. I mean, I would like,
Yeah.
at a minimum, we should figure out their interest, and I assume we can figure out the logistics of kind of what
I
they
think so.
want.
I think so too. I think
Tiers.
You'll just work through it.
That's great.
And, I mean, our fiscal agent, just like anybody else we place it with, they're gonna pledge, I mean, they'll be
Yeah.
pledging against it, so
Correct.
our funds have zero risk.
And then what will probably happen then too is for the funds that are not invested with a local bank, we will then use an investment manager to then invest those funds for the school district. That, and again, those investments will align with what the draw schedule of the project is.
I have a question. I had a patron ask me if the school bond would be available for investment purposes for the public.
It is, and that's a great question. I actually had a call about that too earlier this week as well. I tell you, based on my conversation with the individual I talked to, I think that they were probably assuming that the rates would be higher from their perspective. I think after I told them what the projected rates were going to be, I think that they realized that probably from an individual's perspective, it wasn't going to be a wise investment decision.
Gotcha.
But to answer your question, it is yes, and I would say that if you get calls or emails about that, you can have them call me.
Okay.
And I'd be glad to walk them through or help them determine who it is that need to be visiting with about that.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, good question.
And Karen, if you can contact me, if you don't have Dustin's information, I'll get it for you.
Okay, yeah, I know. Thanks.
No problem.
Well, now, I just want to, I think I said this before, but we kind of accelerated this process just because of where the rates are. And to move and place it out there as soon as we can, I mean, it's really not our job to speculate on where rates are, but take advantage of the opportunities that are out there currently. So hopefully the market stays favorable here while we're trying to, issue these bonds.
Well, I can't agree more, Jim, because you think about, I think any board is always about, can we meet our mill levy commitment, right? And I think that's the ultimate goal, is meeting that commitment. And in this case, it's coming in with interest costs less than obviously what was in the analysis, which is a pretty big deal.
And we're still carrying what we consider a conservative assessed value growth.
I would say, I think this is kind of one of those, we've looked at a number of different solutions and options. I think this
Right.
is the more conservative of all the ones we looked at.
Right.
And also state aid too, so you'll notice on there where we're actually assuming state aid goes down,
Yes.
just again, as another added precaution with respect to the mill levy analysis.
I went back and looked at some of his prior information on that valuation, and I mean, it might have dipped twice in the last 15 or 20 years, but it was like less than 0.25% when it slowed. So at a minimum, we've just, I would say, easily held flat.
Yes.
I mean, very easily. So 2% doesn't seem too bad.
Yeah, it's definitely been more than that recently.
Yeah.
But this is being how long-term it is, that's a good long-term.
Is there anyone have any other questions for Dustin about the process or kind of what we're trying to do here this evening? If not, I appreciate it, Dustin.
Yeah, thank
You've been
you.
a huge help and made a lot of meetings.
Thank you.
All right, with that, we'll jump to, what is it? I guess item 3, our action item for tonight. Yes, I would move that we adopt a resolution authorizing the offering for sale of general obligation refunding and improvement bonds, series 2019-A, and taxable general obligation refunding bonds, series 2019-B, of United School District number 464, Leavenworth County, Kansas. Is there a second?
A second.
All right, all in favor of the motion, please raise your right hand. All right. Motion carried. With that, meeting's adjourned.
Very good.
Does-